CNN.com. That's where you'll find our war tracker. Click on interactive maps there and keep track of the action on the front lines on your own computer. You can also read field reports from our reporters out there in the war zones. Once again, that is all at CNN.com. Now to Paula, standing by in New York. Paula.
I guess, Leon, we're not going to be getting away from the television set anytime soon today, are we?
I don't think so.
We're always looking to bank about 9 or 10 different monitors with stuff going on. Thanks, Leon. We have CNN correspondents posted around the region working to bring you full coverage of the war in Iraq. We leave you this picture now until we hit the top of the hour of downtown Baghdad. Although you can't clearly make it out in this shot, we have been watching rising columns of black smoke blanket the city. Some of the folks we've interviewed today from Baghdad describe that smoke as coming from ditches that the Iraqis have filled with oil and set on fire in an attempt to obscure coalition aircraft and coalition weapons. More right after this break.
If you've been investing in money funds, you've probably noticed your yields have slowed to a trickle. The Strong Ultra Short-Term Income Fund offers higher return potential and a 14-year history of proven performance. For an alternative to today's low yields, call 1-888-4STRONG. That's 1-888-4STRONG. We'll help you build a strong portfolio.
Good morning, welcome. 11 a.m. on the East Coast, 8 a.m. on the West. You're looking at a live picture of Baghdad, 7 p.m. there. Today is Sunday, March 23rd, the fourth day of the war in Iraq. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Paula Zahn in New York. Joining me this morning, Bill Hemmer in Kuwait City and Leon Harris in Atlanta, who gets things started with a look at what is happening at this hour. Leon?
All right, Paula, here are the latest developments at this hour. U.S. Marines are facing heavy resistance near the Iraqi city of Al-Naziriyah. CNN's Alessio Vinci reports that the Marines have suffered some casualties. They entered the town after Iraqi forces ambushed a military convoy bringing supplies to coalition forces in the region there. CNN's Walter Rogers reports an artillery barrage aimed at the 307th Cavalry has left a soldier wounded. He says that 3 shells landed about 75 yards away from the unit. Also, Rogers says that U.S. soldiers on a reconnaissance mission reported seeing members of the Iraqi Republican Guard herding women and children to military positions to use as human shields. That information from a military source. A British military spokesman confirms that a Royal Air Force plane was shot down near the Kuwaiti border and it was brought down by a Patriot missile. The crew of the Tornado GR-4 aircraft is missing at this hour, and an investigation is now underway. Officials say the plane was returning from an operational mission. The U.S. Army is investigating a deadly grenade attack on a unit of the 101st Airborne, and the suspected attacker is one of their own. 1 soldier was killed and a dozen others were wounded. The suspect is now in custody, and he's being interrogated. He's accused of throwing live grenades into the tents of his fellow soldiers. U.S. Marines battled Iraqi forces at Qasr with machine gun and tank fire. A firefight erupted when the Marines encountered a pocket of Iraqi resistance. The battle unfolded on live television earlier today. It all ended when the Marines called in an airstrike from a Harrier jet. And putting a financial price tag on the war in Iraq. A report in today's Washington Post says President Bush plans to ask Congress for about $80 billion to cover the cost of this military campaign. The Post says the details of the proposal could be presented as early as tomorrow. And that's what we have from here in Atlanta. Let's go down to Paula in New York. Paula.
Thanks so much, Leon. We're going to begin this hour's coverage of the war in Iraq with some breaking news out of the Pentagon. Let's go straight to Barbara Starr, who's standing by. Barbara, what can you tell us about the latest on the information we just got about a half hour ago of confirmation of some missing soldiers, American soldiers in southern Iraq?
Paula, what I can tell you is the news is not good for the U.S. military. Pentagon officials telling CNN just a few moments ago that they have now begun the process of notifying some families that U.S. soldiers have been captured by Iraqi military forces and are being held as prisoners of war. We do know that something around 10 U.S. soldiers attached to a maintenance unit in south central Iraq apparently went astray earlier today. They strayed into an area They were confronted by Iraqi military. We understand that some U.S. soldiers were killed, some were captured. According to General Richard Myers, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it is believed that it is something less than 10 soldiers, but the Pentagon now confirming it is beginning to notify the families as it begins to understand the identities of the soldiers now being held by the Iraqis. Just a few moments ago, General Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was in the hallway here by the press office in the Pentagon. Very grim-faced, he said to reporters, "This is just one more crime by the Iraqi regime." General Myers saying it was a violation of the Geneva Convention. And what General Myers, what General Myers was referring to, what he was essentially making public knowledge by that statement, the reference to the Geneva Convention, is there are photographs now of these American soldiers in captivity by the Iraqi forces. General Myers acknowledging that, making that statement, that the Iraqis showing pictures of these Americans, he believes is a violation of the Geneva Convention. Paula?
I guess not only do these pictures exist, Barbara, but apparently the Arab satellite network Al Jazeera has been airing footage of some interviews with what the station identified as captured American prisoners. Did they acknowledge not only these photographs exist, but perhaps there's some videotape lying around of these prisoners?
Yes, Paula. The Pentagon officials, I can tell you, here monitor Al Jazeera, and in fact that is exactly right. They have seen the videotape on Al Jazeera. They have seen Americans, service members, stating their name and their residence, where they live in the United States, on Arab television. They tell us here they have every reason to believe that these soldiers now are prisoners of the Iraqis, and underscoring what one defense official told us a few moments ago, the process of notifying families has begun. What is so sensitive here is they want to try and get to the families and let them know the status of their loved ones before they see it on television. But now that Al Jazeera has aired this tape, it is believed that, of course, that the tape would clearly be shown very quickly in other Western media outlets, and it will be, of course, now that it is out there. Pentagon officials acknowledging that this information is beginning to spread very rapidly, and they are being forthcoming and saying they are notifying the families. They are looking at the tape.
All right, Barbara, we got to
understanding
cut
who
you
these
off.
people
Secretary
are.
Rumsfeld is speaking after a Sunday morning television appearance. Let's listen in, and we'll come back to you.
There have been 77 in Basra. So how do you think there has been any agreement, just like the embedded troops?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Mr. Secretary, there's negotiations with Turkey and the possibility of allowing their troops into Iraq.
We've made no arrangements with Turkey for them their troops to go into Iraq.
Let's say with the Secretary, the German government.
Folks, wait a minute. Look, we can do this for a minute or two,
Okay.
but I cannot listen to 16 people at once.
Right.
And you have to show each other a little
So let's
courtesy.
stick to the Turkish invasion to northern Iraq. The German government threatened the Turks to withdraw its AWACS of service and Pershing II missile crews if Turkey invades northern Iraq. Was this diplomatic step, a severe help for the American cause? What do you think about the Berlin announcement to threaten Turkey?
I've not seen the announcement.
Secretary, Mr. Secretary.
The Washington Post reported that the incident involving British aircraft.
It appears there's an investigation underway, and it appears that there may have been a Patriot battery that struck a UK aircraft, and for whatever reason, the identification of friend and foe communication connection was not made. If that's the case, we don't know the facts. The facts are being investigated, and we will know ground truth at some point.
About still in Iraq.
Just a minute.
Reported that the Al-Qaeda biochemical weapons program is much more advanced than we knew, including the ability to produce cyanide and salmonella. Can you comment on this, or what steps are we taking?
There is a good deal of intelligence about the Al-Qaeda involvement with various types of poisons, toxins, and chemicals. And we hear it from others for the most part, and we have the campaign's been going on for 7 hours. And at some point in the period ahead, one would hope that we'd be able to have forces in places that they'll be able to know of certain knowledge what in fact the Al-Qaeda's been up to in Iraq.
Mr. Secretary, can I ask you one more question about Western Iraq?
You win. You win. This is the last question.
Can you just confirm for us, have coalition troops taken over the areas in Western Iraq from which Iraq can fire Scud missiles to Israel?
We have a good many forces in the West, and they are ranging across the entire western portion of Iraq. And you never can be certain, but the hope and the prayer is that we will have successfully prevented the firing of any ballistic missiles from that portion of Iraq that could strike neighboring countries. I'm going.
Just one for British television, please. One more for British TV, Mr. Secretary.
It is hard to tell whether Secretary Rumsfeld addressed the issue of the reports of American troops being taken as prisoners of war by the Iraqis, because we dipped into that as he was leaving one of those Sunday talk show appearances, and reporters converged on him. He did clear up some of the confusion coming out of the border of Turkey and Iraq today, when he said no arrangements have been made to allow Turkish troops to go into Iraq. Let's quickly go back to Barbara Starr. Barbara, for the viewers that are just joining us, you've got to bring us up to date on what has been confirmed from the Pentagon about American prisoners of war. Go through that again, because a lot of people might not have caught it at the top of the hour.
Let's go through it as we understand it, Paula. A U.S. Army maintenance unit was operating somewhere in south-central Iraq earlier today. As we understand it, that unit strayed into an area that it should not have been in. It encountered Iraqi forces. As we understand it, some American service members were killed. The Pentagon now believes that some have been captured by Iraqi military forces, perhaps less than 10. General Richard Myers acknowledged this publicly earlier this morning. He said that there were reports that somewhat less than 10 Americans had been captured. To be as clear as we can, the Arab news channel Al Jazeera has shown a tape that has been seen here at the Pentagon of Americans, what is believed to be American soldiers, stating their name and the place in the United States where they are from. U.S. officials here at the Pentagon say, based on what they have seen on Al Jazeera, they do believe now that there are American soldiers in Iraqi military hands, and they are beginning to notify families on the basis of the soldiers that did appear on this Al Jazeera tape. Paula?
So once again, Barbara, they say some were captured, some were killed, but we don't know the numbers.
We do not have exact numbers. As best the U.S. military can figure out right now, they do not have an exact number. They believe somewhere around 10, one way or the other.
All right, Barbara, stay with us. We have to pay attention to what's unfolding in Baghdad right now. We see tracer fire. Let's listen in. بغداد We have reached a lull in what was a heavy barrage of anti-aircraft fire in Baghdad. We have talked so much over the last couple of days about American officials saying they have successfully degraded the radar system, but even they have acknowledged it will be many days before they successfully degrade the anti-aircraft radar system. General Grange joins us from CNN Center. General Grange, I'm looking at 4 quadrants of the screen here. I have yet to see any explosions. That doesn't mean anything because we're looking at pretty sliver pictures of Baghdad. But let's talk about what we've seen over the last couple of nights when the bombing has gotten underway. We have seen bombing preceded by anti-aircraft fire, right?
Absolutely. It could be that the Iraqi radar systems or other early warning devices have stated, announced, alerted that coalition aircraft are about to strike, or they could be striking outside of Baghdad and other regions in the country, and so they just go ahead and start firing themselves or alert themselves right there in Baghdad, whether being hit or not.
How sophisticated is the Iraqi system?
Well, the Iraqis have some sophisticated systems. I believe that many have been degraded, and I think a lot of them now are tied together loosely with the ability they have left with minimal command and control.
And when you say with minimum command and control, does that mean they just pick out segments in the sky to hit and they just hope they hit something once they fire off the anti-aircraft fire?
Well, I believe that a lot of the units, if they still maintain and discipline, have a quadrant or a sector, as you said, in the sky that they would engage aircraft in. And that's past, the city is broken down, the altitude over the city is broken down in different quadrants.
And as we understand it, there is stuff that comes in from a lower angle, some that comes in from a higher angle. Do you want to explain that to us?
Well, a lot of times when you see the anti-aircraft fire, all you see is that tracer, 1 in 7 mix, 1 in 4 mix, depending on the type of weapon. Sometimes you only see a flash, and that may be an airburst of a larger millimeter type anti-aircraft weapon system. And some is low-angle fire for lower against lower attacking aircraft, and some is higher altitudes for higher flying airplanes.
General Grange, if you stand by, we're just going to listen to the natural sound coming out there to see if we can hear any sirens, and I want to get straight back to you.
All right.
I can't discern any sirens. Can you hear anything, General Grange?
Not really. It's really hard to say. It doesn't look like there's much going on downtown Baghdad right now.
Let me ask you this. There were a number of reports suggesting witnesses hearing explosions earlier today. We spoke with a man who works for the International Red Cross working in Baghdad, and what he described is hearing explosions that seemed to be come at the same time he saw large columns of black smoke rising, he said, from 12 different points in the city, and in his belief that the Iraqis had dug some trenches, oil trenches, and lighted them on fire to obscure Allied aircraft's aiming devices or their ability to target Baghdad. Now, describe to us what that would do. It doesn't affect satellite-guided weapons, does it?
Well, some of the systems that the coalition forces have, it will not affect it. The obscuration that they're putting up in the sky would usually affect more close-in combat strikes on a battlefield instead of precision strikes against point targets that you see around Baghdad, because they're trying to only hit certain targets to keep the collateral damage down on the civilian infrastructure. So I don't think it'll do much in Baghdad, Paul.
Let's talk more about the kind of precision-guided weapons that are used. We got a briefing from the Royal Air Force earlier today, and the Captain John Lines was describing that during Desert Storm, 10% of the weapons that were used were precision weapons. In this case, it is 90%. Yeah. How staggering is that?
Well, that's for 10 years or 12 years of time since the war. That's quite staggering. Quite an improvement on the inventory of munitions. And again, it's not only to have munitions that are more effective against enemy forces or an enemy target, but again also to reduce collateral damage and civilian death. And so it's a humanitarian reason for it, as well as the effectiveness of the munition itself.
General Grange, the other thing the captain touched on earlier today was a weapon called the Storm Shadow, which he said allows the people that are launching them to go deeper into the ground, penetrate the ground much deeper, and take out command and control centers. Could you tell us a little bit more about this weapon and how often we think has it even been used yet?
Yeah, I'm sure it's been used, and of course the U.S. has the same type of weaponry. It was used in Afghanistan, it's being used in Iraq, and they're penetrating munitions. And the idea is because a lot of the enemy forces that we faced in Afghanistan as well as in Iraq right now have burrowed deeper and deeper into subterranean command centers. And so what the idea is to penetrate the concrete and dirt and not have an explosion. It's a delayed explosion until you get down to what you really want to incapacitate, which may be the communications, the command and control, the communication cables, whatever the case may be. And so a lot of sophistication has gone into those penetrating type munitions.
General Grange, please stand by. We're going to dip back to that live shot once again in Baghdad. I don't make any tracer fire out at this moment, but let's just pause for a second and take in this picture, and then I'll get back to you.
All right.
Okay, General Grange, that could very well be wind. It's really hard to discern from the audio there. Let's talk a little bit more when this next wave of air attacks come, how they will happen. Captain John Lynes of the British Air Force, Royal Air Force, basically saying that 10% of the sorties flown so far have been by the Royal Air Force, the rest done by American planes. But he talked about this integrated system between the British and Americans, and he said basically we can control them at some points, they can control us, we escort each other, we fuel each other. Yeah. Describe to us how you expect this relationship or this teamwork to work from here on out.
Well, there isn't a finer relationship among allies than Great Britain and the United States, just because of the history of supporting each other in conflict or peacekeeping operations or in humanitarian assistance. And so a lot of the techniques and procedures are very much the same. And what he means, the commander means by the Brits work for the U.S. at times, U.S. works for the British. What that means is that at times a flight lead may have a mix of aircraft from both nations. Or it may be British strike aircraft getting support from American AWACS or vice versa. Or American fighters may refuel off of British tankers. And so because they have the commonality of procedures and technology for, let's say, refueling, they're able to do that. And something this big, this complicated, the synchronization involved, you have to have allies that have done this together multiple times in training as well as in previous operations. And so that's what you're seeing here from the commander's brief, that cooperation and working together.
Hope you can be patient with us. We'd love for you to stand by. We need to get to some breaking news out of the Pentagon. We pause one more time to look at this picture of downtown Baghdad and what appears to be a lull in that heavy barrage of anti-aircraft fire that we saw just about 11 minutes ago. Let's listen, and then I'll very quickly go to the Pentagon.
Paula, the news here hasn't changed in the last several minutes. U.S. officials saying they do now acknowledge they are beginning to notify families of what they believe are American POWs now being held by Iraqi military. Let's walk through what we do know about this incident. Earlier today, apparently, a U.S. Army maintenance unit was moving through southern Iraq. It strayed. It came into contact with an Iraqi military unit. There was some fighting. some Americans killed, some Americans captured. We have acknowledged, we do know that the Arab news channel Al Jazeera has a tape of some Americans apparently being interviewed, interrogated by Iraqis. That tape has now been shown to millions of people around the world who get Al Jazeera television. Pentagon officials here acknowledging they have seen the tape. They have seen some identifications of some of the Americans they believe are being held, and they are beginning to notify families on that basis. They don't know at this point, or are not telling us exactly how many Americans involved. They believe something less than 10. Now, General Richard Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as we said earlier, was in the hallway here in the press quarter in the Pentagon just a few moments ago. Very grim-faced. He said that this was one more crime by the Iraqi regime, and said that this was a violation of the Geneva Convention for the Americans to be shown in this fashion. But information at this point, Paul, is very close hold here at the Pentagon, and we're simply going to continue to report the story, see what else we can find out, and let you all know.
Barbara, any of us hearing for the first time are just sickened by the details you've just shared with us. I know this is really fresh news out of the Pentagon, but did you get any reaction beyond what General Myers said on an emotional level about this being one more crime by the Iraqis?
Well, officials here are very grim about all of this. Military officials had warned for days that this would not be, to use their word, a cakewalk operation, that they had yet to encounter the stiffest forces of the Iraqi regime, that as the military, as the ground force moved further into Iraq, they expected more opposition. They were prepared for it. But I suspect they were not prepared. It's very difficult to say anyone is prepared to see American POWs.
Barbara, you talk about this having happened in south central Iraq. Do we know where they were close to? Were they close to Nasiriyah, anywhere near that?
We don't have a firm location on this event. We do know from our reporters in the field, Alessio Vinci, that there had been very fierce fighting around Nasiriyah earlier today. U.S. military coming under enemy fire. There have been a number of reports of sporadic fighting across the region, but no specific location being offered yet on where this incident took place. Again, it was apparently a U.S. Army maintenance unit that had gone into the field, probably to repair some equipment. They apparently strayed somewhere they should not have gone, or they didn't know that they should have gone, and came under enemy fire.
When you say they might have strayed into an area they should not have gone, I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Well, let me try and be more clear, Paula. They perhaps had no knowledge, advanced knowledge, that there were Iraqi forces in that area. And what we don't know is the size of the Iraqi force that may have launched the attack against them. This is a very difficult battlefield. The military, of course, has a great ability to see large Iraqi troop formations, see how they're equipped, see how they're maneuvering. But what's always difficult in any battlefield is when you begin to encounter very small groups of enemy forces. Hard to see how they're maneuvering, hard to see them coming at you. So now, in retrospect, it is said that this maintenance unit strayed, but certainly they must have had no knowledge. One can only assume that they were about to run into some sort of Iraqi military unit.
Barbara, going back to this videotape that the Pentagon now has had a chance to look at, have they characterized for you what they saw on this tape? There are reports that perhaps some of the American soldiers in the tape appeared to be injured. Is there any more detail they gave you?
Not at this time. What they are looking at on the tape, as quickly as they can, we understand, is the identities of the soldiers. They know here at the Pentagon that Al Jazeera is widely watched around the world. They know that these identities are going to come out very, very quickly, and what they want to do is try and identify the soldiers from the tape if they can, and notify the families as quickly as they can. Officials telling us that is the process underway right now, trying to notify family members just as quickly as they can.
It's the kind of story that sends chills up our collective spines here. Barbara, please stand by. On the telephone right now, we have Michael Wilson of the New York Times, who I am told is somewhere near Nasiriyah. Just as a quick reminder, that is where U.S. Marines encountered some heavy resistance and have suffered some casualties in fighting near that city. Michael, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm with the artillery battalion that is with the Marine unit in the area. The battalion all day has been returning fire and launching counter fire to the attack on the infantry units just outside and in on Nasiriyah. It all began just a few minutes before 7 a.m. When the call came over the radio that there was a mortar round being fired at the Marine infantry. So as quickly as they could get their cannons assembled, the howitzers, the artillery unit began firing back. And that's gone on all day. It's been a grueling day that has just kept escalating. There's the infantry troops that are in the fight kept calling back that every kilometer that they advanced towards the town, more and more tanks seemed to pop up, and so the fighting just continued. The Marines have secured both bridges that they were after, but it's the road between the bridges where apparently the worst fighting and the injuries and perhaps casualties have been sustained. It's a 4.5 kilometer road through the middle of the town lined with houses, and that's where all this kind of street fighting has been going on.
Alessio Vinci, who is embedded with the 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines Task Force, said he passed U.S. military vehicles riddled with bullet holes, and it was his understanding that some of the forces were evacuated from the area for treatment. Did you see any signs of that from your location? Okay, the phone line just went dead with Michael Wilson, but once again, the Marines entered that town on Sunday after Iraqi forces ambushed a U.S. military convoy bringing supplies to coalition forces in the region. Wolf Blitzer now joins us live from Kuwait City. Wolf, we have been mentioning the fact that you will be interviewing Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. I think in minutes from now. He made an awful lot of news on the Sunday talk shows. Is he there with you now?
Yes, Paula. We're going to interview him now. We originally had scheduled to interview him at the top of the hour, but given the enormous pace of what's unfolding now in this war, I'd like to interview the Defense Secretary right now. He's joining us live from our Washington studio. Secretary Rumsfeld, thanks so much for joining us. I know this is an incredibly busy time for you, but let's get right to some of the immediate issues at hand. First of all, as you well know, within the past few moments, the Al Jazeera Arabic language television network has broadcast Iraqi television video of American POWs that they say are now in the hands of Iraqi officials, some of them alive, others killed in action. What can you tell us about this?
There have been reports throughout the morning here in the East Coast to the effect that some U.S. soldiers were unaccounted for. Whether the ones that are being shown on that particular station or not, that network, are those individuals, I'm not in a position to say. We do know that the Geneva Convention makes it illegal for prisoners of war to be shown and pictured and humiliated. And it's something that the United States does not do. And needless to say, television networks that carry such pictures are I would say, doing something that's unfortunate.
On the other hand, you could argue, some would make the case that at least their family members are seeing them alive, even if they're not in the best of condition. They could get some comfort from seeing these videotaped pictures.
You can make that argument if you wish.
But what I hear you saying is that you're urging all worldwide news organizations, television networks, not to broadcast these images of these American POWs?
What I'm saying is that it's a violation of the Geneva Convention for the Iraqis to be, if in fact that's what's taking place, to be showing prisoners of war in a humiliating manner.
How many missing American military personnel are there right now?
I can't answer your question right now. I know as of this morning it was a very small number.
Will this affect the course of the war, the fact that the Iraqis now have American POWs?
Wolf, there have been prisoners taken in every war since the beginning of mankind. We treat our prisoners well. We have over 2,000 Iraqi prisoners of war at the present time. They're in POW camps that have been brought along. They're being fed. They're being provided medicine where it's appropriate and needed. The course of this war is clear. The outcome is clear. The regime of Saddam Hussein is gone. It's over. It will not be there in a relatively reasonably predictable period of time. And the people in Iraq need to know that it will not be long before they will be liberated. The leadership and the military in Iraq needs to know that they should act with honor and stop defending a regime that is shortly going to be history.
Mr. Secretary, this broadcast is being seen live around the world, including in Iraq. What is your message to those Iraqi government officials who now have control of these American prisoners?
That they treat those prisoners according to the Geneva Convention, just as we treat Iraqi prisoners according to the Geneva Convention. And further, I would say that they'd be well advised to put down their arms, follow the instructions that have been communicated, and act with honor, and help liberate the Iraqi people from the vicious, repressive regime of Saddam Hussein. The outcome is clear.
When you say it's predictable, the outcome is clear, how much time do you think it will take for the U.S. and British forces to achieve their objective?
At the present time, there are U.S., British, Australian, and Polish forces that are on the ground. There's some 46 nations that are publicly, politically supporting this coalition effort. There is a broad and deep coalition that is being enormously helpful in this effort, and their forces are wonderful, fine young people as well. The time is going to depend on how much resistance there is, and the loss of life will depend on how much resistance there is. And our hope and our prayer is that this will end soon with a minimal loss of life on the part of the Iraqis as well as the U.S. and coalition forces.
Are you talking days, weeks, or months?
We will be at it until it's over. And it's not possible to know. There are any number of things that could happen that would cause difficulties, that could delay things, but there is nothing that can happen that will change the ultimate outcome. The outcome is certain, and the armed forces of the Iraqi government should put down their arms, follow the instructions that they've been given, and end any resistance at all, because it's futile.
The Iraqis claim to have shot down a coalition aircraft over Baghdad. There were pictures of Iraqi troops firing into the Tigris River. Have all U.S. and coalition aircraft returned safely to their bases and aircraft carriers?
There have been, I know nothing about what you're saying that the Iraqis are saying about some river. There have been some aircraft that have not returned safely. One was a UK aircraft that was shot down by a Patriot battery, we believe, and that is being investigated. There were some helicopters that collided in midair over Kuwait and did not return safely. To my knowledge, no other aircraft are missing or unaccounted for.
There was a very disturbing incident, as you know, yesterday at Camp Pennsylvania here in Kuwait involving apparently, the suggestion is a U.S. soldier lobbed a grenade or more into a tent with officers and troops from the 101st Airborne Division. What can you tell us about that incident?
There is apparently an investigation that's underway at the present time, and an individual is a subject of that investigation, and that it has to run its course, and we'll find out precisely what took place.
Do you have anything you could tell us about the motivation, what may have caused this individual to act?
I have no idea.
And do you know if he was acting alone or in conspiracy with others?
The investigation will determine that, but I've heard no indication that there was any conspiracy.
We're getting reports now from some of our embedded journalists on the front lines suggesting that the Iraqis are placing so-called human shields at various military and other strategic targets as U.S. and coalition forces move up towards Baghdad. If that's the case, will that deter you from going after those targets?
I do not have information to that effect, although we've seen photographs indicating that the Iraqis have written on the tops of some buildings that there are human shields there. That also is a violation of international law. The Iraqis have a practice of violating international law and ignoring international conventions and treaties. Wolf, the outcome of this is determined. It's certain. This conflict is going to end, and the regime of Saddam Hussein will be gone. And it will end sooner if people behave rationally and put down their weapons and stop resisting. It will end longer if they are foolish and get themselves killed because they refuse to surrender and put down their arms. But the outcome is clear. We are not going to be deterred at all.
Have U.S. and coalition forces encountered so far any evidence of Iraqi chemical or biological weapons, indeed any weapons of mass destruction whatsoever?
Wolf, the coalition forces have been on the ground for something about 72 hours. The number of forces in Iraq grows every hour. They are basically in the south, moving towards Baghdad. They're in the west, worried about the Scud baskets in that area and trying to avoid having any missiles, ballistic missiles, fired at neighboring countries. And they're in the north, working with Kurdish forces and a number of teams up there. The task is to remove this regime and then go about the task of looking for weapons of mass destruction. At the present time, they're focused on winning the war.
Has there been any evidence that any of the missiles or rockets that were fired by Iraqis, whether into Kuwait, where I am right now, or into southern Iraq or elsewhere, had anything other than conventional warheads?
Nothing that I've seen validated.
Is there any evidence the Iraqis have actually fired a Scud missile?
Not that I've seen.
That missile that went into Iran and hit an oil depot, was that fired by Iraqis or, as the Iranians and the Iraqis suggest, by an errant, perhaps cruise missile or other U.S. weapon?
The present speculation is that it was an Iraqi weapon, but it's possible that it wasn't, and that's the kind of thing that will have to be looked at, and the debris, the remnants of the weapon probably could be inspected and some determination made finally, but only after you have ground truth. Certainly if it was an errant weapon from a coalition force, it would have been an accident and totally unintended. But at least the preliminary estimate is that it was an Iraqi weapon.
What happens if the Iraqis, as the U.S. and coalition forces move closer towards Baghdad, Tikrit, which is the hometown of Saddam Hussein? What if the Iraqis do use chemical or biological weapons, radiological weapons against U.S. troops? How will the U.S. respond?
The coalition forces are trained and equipped to operate in that environment. There's no question but that if it's done, it will slow things down. There is no way it will change the outcome. And what is also certain is that anyone who is involved in following out an order to use weapons of chemical or biological weapons will be hunted down and treated with accordingly. The important thing to remember, Wolf, is that Saddam Hussein cannot use weapons of mass destruction himself. He can give the order, but someone is going to have to carry out that order, and numbers of people are going to have to carry out that order. And those people are being told in no uncertain terms that they must not do that. If they follow those orders, they will be tracked down and punished.
By all accounts, Mr. Secretary, the big battles are still coming. The notion that it was supposedly relatively easy in the south, where the Shia are dominant, as you get closer to Baghdad, to Tikrit, the Republican Guard, the Special Republican Guard, the defenses, the resistance might be more intense. Are you expecting heavy resistance from these so-called elite Republican Guard units?
It's a distinct possibility. The Republican Guard units and the special operators have been pulling back towards the Baghdad-Tikrit area for a period of some weeks. We have been in touch with some of them. There is at least a prospect that some of them will surrender and assist us. There's also the prospect that the resistance will get a good deal more difficult and that the progress will be slower. We've been in the country just for 72 hours, and the forces are moving towards Baghdad. And thus far, the air war and the ground war have gone along in an excellent manner.
How far precisely, if you can tell us, are the troops from Baghdad, the outskirts of Baghdad?
Well, they're moving along ahead of plan. Let me leave it there. We have smaller elements in various places, and then we have main elements that are moving up towards from the south in the direction of Baghdad, but I don't want to give particulars as to exactly where they are.
Is, as far as you know, Saddam Hussein alive?
We have to assume he is. There's no question but that there were senior Iraqi regime leadership in the compound which we attacked several nights ago. And the intelligence reports suggest that the attacks were successful in terms of hitting targets. What is not knowable from the air or from long distance is precisely who was where in that compound at any given moment when the weapons actually struck. But we are optimistic that we have effectively hit a regime command and control target, and time will tell who was in it.
Is there any evidence Saddam Hussein was injured in that specific attack on the first night of the war?
You know, the word evidence is a hard one. The standard of evidence that people hold others to varies depending if you're in a court of law or in a war. And in a war, the kind of evidence that people are thinking about doesn't exist for the most part. You just don't get ground truth instantaneously in situations like that. We have reports from people who suggest that they were eyewitnesses to certain things, but we can't go out and double check them, and you can't talk to other people who had a different perspective, and therefore it's not possible to know for certain knowledge precisely what took place.
Is he, though, in control, as far as you can tell, of his military and of the regime?
Well, we'll know more the closer we get to Baghdad and Tikrit, one would think. But we hear reports that there seems to be some disarray in the Iraqi leadership. That's speculation. I would call it speculation. It's surmise. It's hard to say precisely. In these kinds of situations, we could be being tricked in some way. So these things will unfold. What we do know is that the outcome is certain, that if people want to save lives, they should surrender. We're telling them in multiple ways, through leaflets, through the radio, through television, through direct communication by telephone, how they can avoid being killed and how they can help their country and liberate their people. And they'd best do that, because it'll just take us longer, but it will still happen.
Could you tell us what the line of communication is between the U.S. and the Republican Guard in trying to encourage them to surrender?
It varies from unit to unit, and it tends to be in a variety of different ways, and I don't know that I'd want to get into the details.
But you can tell us it's ongoing, it's continuing right now.
That's correct. On a unit level.
Are you up on a unit-to-unit level, meaning U.S. military personnel or intelligence community personnel?
It varies, but it is at the unit level. It is not at a senior Iraqi armed services or regime level. There aren't any kind of negotiations going on at the very top level. The discussions that take place relate to specific units, and we've had good success in a number of units surrendering, and that's made a lot of sense. People's lives have been saved.
There was a report here in the Gulf suggesting 3 top Iraqi leaders may have been killed in that initial airstrike. Tariq Aziz, the deputy prime minister, Ali al-Majid, so-called Chemical Ali, and Izzat Ibrahim. Do you have any evidence that any of those 3 may have been killed in that initial airstrike?
No, I don't.
Let's move on and talk about the airstrikes. As you know, they're meeting with widespread criticism. The pictures that were seen around the world showed huge explosions in Baghdad, and the airstrikes, of course, continue. How can you be so sure that innocent civilians are not dying in those airstrikes?
Wolf, I saw some of those images that were carried on television around the world, and no one could watch them and not just feel your heart break that people can be killed and that there can be some unintended loss of life. The fact, however, is that there was not an attack on Baghdad. There was an attack on the Iraqi regime, and it was as precise as ever before in the history of warfare. The care that went into the targeting is just breathtaking. And in the battle damage assessments, and the people from the ground that we talk to are telling us that to a great extent in Baghdad, people are going about their business because they are so impressed with the precision of those targeting and those bombs and those attacks that they feel that the coalition forces are doing it in as the best possible way. It looks like it's a bombing of a city, but it isn't. It is a bombing of military targets, very precisely, and regime targets. And the television image is belied by what's seen on the ground.
But we've spoken to journalists, Mr. Secretary, who were there, who heard the explosions, the thunder. They said the earth basically shook for them. They said it was a terrifying experience. There are some 5 million people who probably were terrified during that ordeal and continue to be terrified right now. The question is this the way to win over the hearts and minds of the Iraqi people?
Wolf, the Iraqi people are hostages to a vicious regime. They will be liberated. It's going to happen. The only way to do it, they tried diplomacy for 13 years. They tried economic sanctions. Neither worked. They tried limited military applications in the northern and southern no-fly zones. That didn't work. They tried 17 UN resolutions. President Bush went one extra step and provided 48 hours for the Iraqi regime to leave the country and leave it without a conflict. Every single effort was rebutted, rejected. Now, that leaves only one course. You say, is there any way to do it without conflict? No, everything else was tried. And the Iraqi people are going to end up liberated. The ones that have been liberated in the southern part of this country are grateful and appreciative. And that will be the case as Baghdad is liberated.
But there are plenty of people out there, counterterrorism experts, who've already expressed fear that the images of this bombing, the shock and awe campaign, will merely foment terrorism, create new recruits for Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups to go after American targets.
Wolf, I know there's lots of so-called experts opining on this and that. The fact is that the terrorists did not need any provocation. They attacked the United States of America on September 11th, viciously killed 3,000 innocent men, women, and children of every religion, of every nationality across the globe. That was not a response to an attack on Baghdad. It was an unprovoked attack. They are raising money. They are training people. We stopped them in Afghanistan. We tore up their terrorist training camps. We drove them out of that country. And in that country now there's a government that's representative of the Afghan people. And that is what's going to happen in Iraq. And the idea that this is provocative is wrong. Weakness is provocative. It entices people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. And war is everybody's last choice. No rational person wants war. President Bush doesn't. The American people don't.
General Meyer said the other day that the war was moving on all fronts in the south, in the west, and in the northern part of Iraq. Let's go through a few specific details. In the south, I assume Qasr, the key port in the south, has been captured and secure. What about Basra and Nasiriyah?
I don't use the word secure, and the reason I don't on the port is because nothing's perfect. There's no question but that the coalition forces have occupied the port area. They're now in the process of taking mines out of the water so that humanitarian assistance and medical supplies and food can come in through that port. But I suspect that there will continue to be sporadic firefights from some dead-enders who don't want to give up. So I think that secure is probably somewhat of an overstatement. Basra is the same situation. The forces have moved in from the south. Most of the resistance has ended in the Basra area, but there'll, I would suspect, continue to be some dead-enders who will continue to fire at coalition forces. The oil wells in the south have been secured, quote-unquote, but there again, there could be some untidiness as we go forward. And British forces are now occupying the bulk of those that area where the oil wells are, and it's important that they be saved for the Iraqi people. There are about 10 wells that are burning, and we have people coming in the next 48 hours who will begin to put those fires out. As forces move north, there will be conflict and firefights, but we won't know whether the resistance, once we get closer to Baghdad, will be different from what we've experienced in the south, but I think it's reasonable to expect that it might be much more fierce.
And Nasiriyah, is that yet under coalition control?
The forces are clearly in that area, and I'll leave it to General Franks and his terrific team of people to characterize the progress that's being made by coalition forces.
Let's talk about Western Iraq for a moment. Can people in Israel sleep easier tonight because U.S. forces are in control of that so-called H-2 and H-3 airfield from which so many Scuds, 39 Scuds to be specific, were launched against Israel during the first Gulf War?
Well, there's no question but that is the area where the ballistic missiles were launched last time, and they put at risk neighboring countries as well as Israel. We have a lot of special operators ranging across that generally vacant area, unpopulated area, and we feel pretty good about the fact that we've covered a lot of that ground. I wouldn't want to say that it's absolutely certain that something couldn't be fired from that area, but given the overhead control we have, the air superiority, indeed air dominance in that part of the country, and the number of people on the ground, I think that we can feel much better today than yesterday or the day before with respect to that issue.
Mr. Secretary, I know your time is limited. Before I let you go, very briefly on the north, Turkey, there are conflicting reports whether Turkish forces have indeed moved across the line into northern Iraq or not. Have Turkish forces gone into northern Iraq, and does the United States want them to be there?
I've been hearing reports from the press almost every 4 hours for the past 3 or 4 or 5 days, reporting or alleging or speculating that Turkish forces have moved into northern Iraq in force. I can say two things about that. We have no intelligence evidence that suggests that's true. Second, the Turkish forces tell us repeatedly that it is not true. I believe them. In the event that we find that not to be the case, why, obviously that would be unfortunate.
Are U.S. warplanes flying over Turkish airspace now as they go on bombing runs towards Iraq?
U.S. coalition aircraft are flying over all of Iraq. There is no question about it. They're covering every inch of that country.
And the shock and awe campaign is going to continue for how long?
The ground attack and the air attack is going to continue with precision and care until the Iraqi regime is removed and we have been able to find and dismantle their weapon-producing capabilities.
Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Paul Azzan, let me bring it back to you. Obviously, the Defense Secretary clearly convinced it's only a matter of time before the U.S. and coalition forces get the job done in Iraq. How long? Of course, he refuses to speculate.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that because I was taking notes fast and furiously as you were interviewing Secretary Rumsfeld, and I counted over a half dozen references to that very fact, and it makes you wonder, and I'm going to share some of what he told you now, about the secondary audience he may have out there since this is being broadcast internationally.